Finishing out a show is a tough thing to do, and I mean that from a story perspective. The Turkish Netflix original series The Gift, or Atiye, released its third and final season. It has a lot to wrap up, so does it stick the landing, or does it fall short? The Gift wraps up its third and final season as the story picks up about 8 years after season 2. Atiye and Erhan have not given up hope of finding their daughter who was kidnapped, and they work to uncover the mysteries surrounding the ancient temple Göbekli Tepe, and they have to discover what their intertwined-through-time lives mean for humanity. So I remember really liking season 1. I know there were a bunch of unanswered questions as the season concluded, but it just whet my appetite for more, despite not feeling totally satisfied with the missing info. Season 2 answered some, but then worked really hard to raise a whole bunch more questions. It brought more and more to the lore and showed us a new side to the world. So when we get to season 3, it better answer all the unanswered questions that the show has created. And I'm happy to say that it does answer a lot of those questions that had been raised by the first 2 seasons. That being said, it still did leave some things very unanswered, and I felt these were kind of central to the story, or at least would help us gain a greater understanding. Now, I watched the show in the original Turkish language with English subtitles, and there's one portion in episode 1 that Erhan is explaining something very key to the story, and the subtitles just stop. I mean, I rewound it several times because I thought maybe it was a buffering or a bandwidth issue, but no luck. So then I switched to English to hear what it was saying just so that I could figure it out, but there's no audio. So I switched back to Turkish and let the scene continue. As it does, Erhan is speaking of how something is a secret and that it shouldn't be revealed. It made me frustrated and then made me laugh at the cleverness. So if you're like me and you're watching and all of a sudden the subtitles don't appear for a minute during episode 1, don't worry. It's actually for an effect and they will come back. I really like that the show is in one sense a love story. If you look at many of the characters' interactions and relationships, many of their motivations can be traced right back to love. The choices they make and the actions the characters take work to illustrate how they'll do anything that is in the interest of the one they care about, even if it's to the detriment of themselves. I liked some of the imagery, especially how you'd see tiny icons appear all over in subtle ways. I mean, for example, the image of an eye is drawn multiple times throughout the season, and it'll show up in jewelry on a character, or even scrawled in small and inconspicuous places. I also like the discussion of time and choices that is raised in the story. The concepts are both extremely complex and they're understandable, and the show, I think, breaks them down so that we don't get lost in what's being discussed. Now, something that's enjoyable is how the story was attacking the mystery from several different perspectives, so that we get to watch characters pursue lines that we hope are all going to converge. But this does also mean that the show can become distracted by going down paths that are less interesting or less engaging. I'm also very happy that we see some character growth in one of the semi-antagonists. The change we watch is good, and because of how it's set up, it does feel natural and not forced. Especially because we still see the conflict that the character goes through internally as they make their choices to grow. I still really enjoy many of the characters too. Atiye is still good, but there are some moments that feel more like she's taking part in a music video than an actual dramatic series. And I blame that more on direction and script than on the actress, but it's still just a little odd. Erhan gets to drive part of his own quest, but I felt that he was not fully utilizing his professor knowledge to examine the clues and find the answers. He was more along for the ride and dependent on others to just figure everything out. There's a new addition with the character of Aden. She barely has dialogue, so just about everything she does relies on her conveying emotion through facial and body expressions. For the most part, she does a good job. Sometimes she's just kind of a bump on a log, but that's also sort of in line with part of her character. I think, though, the standout for the season was Ozan. He takes on a larger role this time and plays it convincingly. I like that I was constantly conflicted in my feelings of him. Sometimes I wanted to root for him, and other times I just wanted him to disappear. And for me, that means he was doing a great job creating a complex and layered character. Now, the pace of the show is kind of uneven. The first 3 to 4 episodes felt like they had an urgency and were giving us a good amount of information to fill in holes that have been there since the first season. But then in the middle, like episodes 5 and 6, they started to drag. And there were some repetitive moments as well as a lot of character meandering through some slow motion sequences. And those made me feel the time and the length of the show. Now, episodes 7 and 8 did pick back up, and I began to feel some urgency again. There was an actual countdown in the show that is made to really make us feel a sense of a time limit, but it had attention drawn to it so infrequently that it felt more like an afterthought than anything. And the conclusion was kinda lackluster for me. I know landings are hard to stick, but this one just fell a little short. It was meant to feel tense and very dramatic, where we feel the anxiety of our characters as they have to make choices, but that just wasn't really there. The scene felt rushed, and it lacked the punch and the payoff that was kind of being promised by the buildup. The very end also had a sequence that felt more like it was a commercial for Scientology. It was odd and probably not the strongest move to have as your final scene. So overall, this final season wasn't a dud. It had some great moments, and I still really enjoyed the ride the narrative was taking us on. There are more than a few weak points when it came to the story, but I was still invested in the mystery and the mystique of the show. And that's especially when it came to the mysticism or supernatural or sci-fi elements that are introduced. And I say or because I'm not exactly sure how I'd classify them. And I'm also not sure I'd classify them as only one or the other. It's kind of more of a mixture. I'm glad that the show does wrap up and provide some good closure for us. While I think there were stronger ways to complete the story, it's not wholly disappointing. I'm sure at some point I'm going to go back and binge all 3 seasons together to see how they fit and find out if my overall impression changes for better or worse. There's brief sex, some baby butt nudity, a lot of profanity, and some very brutal violence. I give the final season of The Gift 3 out of 5 couches. Are you binging this show? Do you have a favorite character? Let me know who you root for in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.